You're listening to the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. If you're catching us later on, remember, you can catch us, be a part of the conversation. We stream live, usually Tuesdays, 8:30, 9:30, somewhere in that range. Follow us on Twitter, and you can catch the entire podcast. Talking schedules with this edition of the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. Opening with the Ravens and Bengals. How difficult is that? Good thing? Bad thing? Do we like it? Not like it? What does it mean for the Chiefs? What is the most critical spot on the schedule for the Chiefs? Odd start times all over the place for the Chiefs. Good thing? Bad thing? I think everybody thinks it's a bad thing. Could it actually be a good thing? Playing on Christmas again, plus 3 games in 10 days. Closing with 3 out of 4 on the road. And, of course, we'll close with our predictions. Right now, don't hold them, so don't hold us to it. Still some free agency to go. Still training camp to go. But we'll give you what we think right now we're looking at for the Chiefs record. It's coming up right now on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.
You are listening to the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Chiefs on planet Earth, breaking down the Chiefs like no one else can. Red, Gold, and Bold is hosted by Jeff Chadiha, Sam McDowell, and Soren Petro. Jeff Chadiha is a senior columnist and on-air personality for the NFL Network and NFL.com. Sam McDowell is the sports columnist for the Kansas City Star. Soren Petro is the afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. The Red, Gold, and Bold podcast is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here are the hosts of the Best Chiefs podcast, Jeff Chadiha, Sam McDowell, and Soren Petro.
Thank you, Curtis. We do appreciate it. The schedule was released been about a week ago now as the podcast drops for you. Time to break it all down and see what we think about this schedule. Jeff Chadiha, NFL Network, NFL.com. Sam McDowell, Kansas City Star, Soren Petro with you as we talk about the schedule. We've known the opponents, gentlemen, for a while. Now we know the order that they will play them in. Any first, biggest reaction that you had to the schedule coming out, Jeff, when you saw what it was for the Chiefs, and then we'll dive in with how it opens?
Going to be tough. That was the first reaction. I mean, you knew who they were going to play, but when you look at the way it's laid out for them, especially starting with Baltimore and Cincinnati, there's going to be some serious challenges involved. And really, it's, to me, as I look at it, we'll get more into this as we talk about some of the critical stretches. It's just they're playing a lot of physical teams, and there's a lot of opportunities for them to get beaten up over the course of the season. And something that's been an underrated part of their success over the last, whatever it's been, 5 years, is just they've been a pretty healthy team. They haven't had the substantial injuries. Yeah, Menahue went down and some other guys have been banged up, but for the most part, the key players have been there. And so, yeah, it's going to be arguably their toughest schedule since Mahomes has been here.
Yeah, anything that first grabbed you, Sam? I'm kind of with Jeff. I had seen the opponents. I'm like, this is a salty group. And, I knew it was going to look salty when it came out. But I ended up going, wow, there are some rough patches here. I think there's some kisses along the way as well, which we'll get to, but it did look pretty solid. I knew it would, but still just finally seeing it was like, ooh, that could be tough.
Yeah, I mean, my first takeaway was it's a terrible reporter schedule because it's
going to affect your life.
Christmas in Pittsburgh. All the cold weather cities are in December and January. The hot weather cities, the preseason game is somehow in Jacksonville, Florida. So that's the primary takeaway, and I'm prepared to spend the next 45 minutes talking about it.
Okay, let's start with the opener. They opened with Baltimore. We knew that was coming. Cincinnati leaked out pretty soon after that. It's boy, right out of the gate, double barrel with 2 of your biggest competitors. It's important to and they usually do really well in camp. That's one of the things Andy Reid's got. The Bengals usually struggle to get things going early on. good or bad, to start with two of your biggest rivals for the number 1 seed?
I think it's bad. I mean, it's the way I've picked my schedule to lay out. I had them winning one of these games. I just don't know which one it's going to be. Probably the money, the safe bet would be on Baltimore, given what happened last year in the AFC Championship game, and a lot of those guys are going to be back. But the Bengals are fearless, and I almost feel this is the one team. And you're right, they do start slow, but this is the one team where whenever they play them, it's just like, all right, we're going to battle. This is like a gang war. This is serious stuff for them. So I don't anticipate them coming in to Arrowhead and taking it lightly or blowing it off, especially with Joe Burrow having gone down last year. I just feel like, man, it's just like we're going to find out real fast. In our last podcast, we talked about distractions and Rashee Rice and all this stuff, how ready this team is going to be to play, because I don't think this is a matter of, Andy Reid all this time, Mahomes, openers. It's just like these are legit teams that can come in here and kick their ass.
Yeah, they're big boys. Sam, good or bad? Who's it better for? Better for the Chiefs? I will say this: of the first two, I know the Bengals open with the Patriots, so they get that kind of Northeast Louisiana before you take on a fellow Big Fiver, to kind of get the kinks out. Not the Chiefs. They got to go with Baltimore. Baltimore, I think, has the Raiders at their place afterwards. So if you're looking at like the 2-2 for each of them, they each get kind of a break with the other game. Chiefs have both of these guys. Could it be a positive, Sam?
Yeah, I actually think it's a good thing. And the reason I think that is because, look, the NFL went 2 decades without a repeat champion. And this is not like the same 1 out of 32 teams winning with the same odds chance. Like repeat champions theoretically are pretty good teams. It took 19 years before one of them won again. And I think it's one of the many reasons, is because 31 teams go into the offseason, then go into training camp knowing they have to be better than they were the last year. One team goes into training camp knowing what they did last year was good enough. And I thought the Chiefs benefited last year when they lost to the Lions. I don't think it's coincidental that they won their next 6 games. They were told right off the bat, you're not good enough to win. And I don't think it's coincidental that after they lost the Christmas Day game, they never lost again. Those are 2 instances when it was the rude awakening that you have to be better. And so they're going to get that sort of greeting to start off the season. And by the way, they know these 2 teams are the best 2 teams on their schedule. 2 of at least the best teams. I think these 2 teams are better than the Bills are. So I think it's the 2 best teams on their schedule, in which case I think training camp could already provide that lesson. That
Better than the Niners, by the way?
Yeah, Niners are in there too. I guess I should say that the 2 teams that I think, are most likely to stand in their way of getting to a Super Bowl. But I think they could have that lesson before they actually play the game, because they're acutely aware of the difficulty of these 2 games out the gate.
I think where it can be a positive is Andy Reid's really good coming out of the gate. I mentioned the Bengals struggle. Like, if you could flip flop them, I'd like it more, because the Bengals are kind of oafs early, right? That seems to be their MO, is struggle coming out of the gates.
Joe Burrow, sorry to interrupt, Soren, but just to underscore your point, Joe Burrow has a losing record in the opening month of the season for his career. And I'm not saying it's all his fault, but the Bengals have a losing record with Joe Burrow in the opening month.
By the way, he's jumped right into the Eric Eager role, Jeff. Just cut me off. Feels like it. It's perfect.
My interruption is at least to help you with your point.
To commandeer it.
not to beat me down. Yes, we love you, Eric. We love you. He's still our brother. No, we're just joking around here. But no, and I do think, look, I think the Ravens and Harbaugh are tough. I think the only reason the Chiefs have kind of had that number is because Mahomes is better than Lamar Jackson. But Lamar Jackson's really good. And if the Ravens are on their game and the Chiefs make some mistakes, they'll get them. I think that the part that makes it so critical is 9 road games in 15 out of 15 are left. Like, you're a heavy road after this. Yeah. Like, getting 2 when you only have 8, when you're on the short home, short end of the stick on the home game total, that makes this critical. You don't want to be playing catch up, right? Like, that's why, And that's why when we mentioned on a podcast, the last podcast about are they focused? Can they get focused? Because they need to be focused because they can't afford to come out 0-2, 1-3.
Don't you think that was part of the Lions game last year, though? Like, did any of us think that the Chiefs had their best possible focus in that Lions game? And we understand there were some other circumstances, right? With Chris Jones, Travis Kelce gets hurt the week of practice, but they dropped 9 passes in the game. It seemed like a lack of focus was part of the issue. I don't think that you could possibly, like, we know all the distractions on every team's banner night across all sports. I think it's going to be really harder to overlook a team you just played in the AFC Championship game.
Yeah. Well, and look, I'm trying to think back. I don't have all their schedules in front of me from the last 5 years, but it feels as if most of their openers have been fairly easy opponents, right? They had Arizona a couple of years ago, and they had Houston after they won 2019, and Houston ended up being a dog crap team but in the end. And so they, it's going to be as tough on them as it's going to be on the Ravens and the Bengals. And as Sam alluded to, all these teams know this is going to affect seeding at the end of the year. And so there's a lot more riding on this for all these teams. So, yeah, if you get what we talked about in the last podcast, you get the receivers being question mark, you're walking out there without Rashee Rice, the left tackle is, going through some growing pains, the cornerback position is tough. These teams can exploit that pretty easily. Those become big problems against these teams. So that's why, I feel like, yeah, they're good enough to split, but I could easily see them being 0-2. You're not going 2-0 against those two teams. I don't see that happening.
Oh, I'll object to that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to guarantee that they're going to go 2-0.
What percentage would you put on it?
Well, I think they're probably, the real math, Sam, you're good on the math. You're the poker player, and you play the role of Eric Eager now. I would say they're probably 60%. What odds makers would tell you is they're 60% in each game, which would tell you they're 36% to win both, right? To come out 2-0. Yeah. And so that would lean towards your numbers. But I don't ever think those odds are right with a Patrick Mahomes team. They say that all the time. The Chiefs are 60%, 64%, yet their win percentage with Patrick Mahomes is like 780. So, obviously they're not just 64%, because even when they're supposed to beat, they're going to beat a bad team, they're like, the math says they're 80%. Listen, I'm not going to guarantee that they're going to go 2-0. The good part is they do get extra rest getting ready for the Bengals, right? That does help. Both them and the Ravens are equal, but then they get a few extra days to get ready for the Bengals, and I think that gives them a pretty good – and Andy Reid's really good coming out of the gates.
Yeah, I'm going to go back and check the schedule so I can see who they were playing again. Because I feel like what they've got out of the gates is one cupcake and one good team. Or one team that's going to, crap their pants like the Chargers a couple of years ago and give a game away.
Yeah, but the Chargers can't be everyone's pick to contend with the Chiefs, and then when they lose, be like, well, they're pant grabbers. Which is it? Either, the Chiefs handle business or – on a quality team, or they suck. I don't want to hear both, depending upon what it is. I want to come back to what Sam said about the Lions. You said that they weren't focused, right? Or was that Jeff?
No, I think that was an element of that game.
I'll disagree, because I think not focused from the standpoint that Chris Jones was clearly not focused. He was focused on a contract. Yes. Not focused Travis Kelce because he wasn't playing. He's focused on rehab. Yes. The guys on the field, the drops, did they not focus in all year? Did they not focus until the last 3 or 4 games? I find that hard to believe. The drops were a problem for the first 3 quarters of the year, and they were only fixed when they took certain guys off the field. The problem, I don't think, if you want to say Andy Reid wasn't focused because he and Brett Veach and his coaching staff and the front office keep kidding themselves into thinking, they're not accurately, evaluating Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney, so they weren't focused because they ran those guys out there. I don't think that's the case. I think they want to get them over the hump. They knew they would have some problems. They want to get them over the hump. Like, if Kadarius Toney doesn't play, they beat the Lions. Period. End of discussion.
Who's playing instead of Kadarius Toney?
I don't care. I literally don't care. He literally, in that game, since you're bringing up the Lions game, Curtis said it. If every ball, he had one catch for like 3 yards, which is kind of his average. He's after the game on Monday, he said, listen, if every ball that was thrown Kadarius Toney's way, he had just knocked into the ground, Chiefs win.
Yeah.
By trying to catch it, he knocked one up into the air for a pick six, it was a 1 or 2 point game. So I don't think focus was a problem last year. I really don't.
So
I think not catching was a problem.
You think Kadarius Toney was focused in the Lions game then?
Well, if you want to say, I don't think Kadarius Toney is good. I think one of the reasons he's not good is because he's not focused.
Well, that's
He was
the Lions MVP. He was the Lions MVP of that game.
Yes, he was.
His lack of focus took over the game. And by the way, this is important because this is going to be a real storyline for the Chiefs all season. They were just told that you can have a disappointing regular season and still win the Super Bowl. They need to remind themselves that's not the conventional path. That's not the preferred path. They did it the hard way. It doesn't have to be that difficult going into the postseason. And I think a theme for them in the entire season is going to be realizing that every game still matters, that the opening game of the season still matters against the Baltimore Ravens, even though you lost last game. And by the way, people are talking about the fact they didn't have Chris Jones last year. The defense was really good against the Lions.
Yeah,
we were that game thinking the defense was better than we anticipated.
Yeah, it was. But listen, no Travis Kelce, no Chris Jones. 2 Hall of Fame players.
But Soren,
and they got word about Travis Kelce like 10 minutes before the game.
Yeah, but Soren, we could also go forward to the playoffs and say teams they played against didn't have key players, right? I mean, at some point,
yes,
that all matters, right?
100%.
Yeah,
and I agree, it does matter. And I think just as it, like, listen, but where it balances out when you look at the big picture of the Chiefs is, it is a fact their offensive line was decimated when they played the Tampa Bay Bucks in the Super Bowl, right? That is a fact, and it contributed to at least the lopsided nature, if not who won and lost. As it's a fact that the Bills had injuries. That is a fact. And you don't give back the trophy because the other team is hurt. I got it. And I'm not debating that the Lions went out and took it. They did. I'm just debating that there's a history of lack of focus.
In the opener game last year, there was a lack of focus.
I agree with Sam on that. I'm with Sam. I feel as if they rolled out there as if, okay, we're just going to beat this team. It's a 9-8 team that's got some hype around it. They're not that serious. I think Detroit proved over the course of the year that they were good enough to beat the Chiefs, even if Travis Kelce and Chris Jones were playing. The Green Bay Packers beat them with Chris Jones and Travis Kelce playing. So we know that it can happen. The bigger question is, I guess Sam's saying, or when I'll go back to the point I was making before, which is it's not – I just looked at the schedules for the last 5 years and saw a lot of bad teams, a lot of Chargers crapping their pants a couple of times, Houston Texans in there.
A lot of dirty diapers. Sam's got to change diapers still in his life. Come on, give him a break for a couple hours.
Overrated Jaguars team. The Raiders were in there. Like this is the only time they've actually had a 2-game stretch like this to start the season was when they played the Browns and they played the Ravens in 2021. Yeah, 2021. And so that's Baker Mayfield playing at a high level and the Browns being a playoff team. When that's the Ravens when they beat him on Monday night when Clyde Edwards-Helaire fumbles. And
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, and so to me, that's like this is going to be like that kind of stretch where they ended up 1-1.
The Red, Gold, and Bold podcast is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete with free consultations, no commissions, in-house crew. Every project comes with a written warranty. Gann Asphalt keeps your parking lot safer, helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. Make a great first and last impression with your clients, with your customers. Let Gann Asphalt and Concrete do what they've been doing in Kansas City for 30 years. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call them at 816-484-3338. Let's talk about where the most critical point in the schedule is. I'll make it real easy. It's those first 2 games because I do not think you want to be playing catch up. I think you need to get your shit together and be focused off whatever's going on now. They need to be focused and come out of the gates, and they need to play this thing from the front because there are so many road games. I know they're great on the road. Everyone keeps saying, well, they were 10-2 on the road. I know that. And I'm not going to tell you they're dead. They come out 1-1 or 0-2. I just don't think that's what you want to set up. And no one's won 3 in a row in the Super Bowl era ever. Yeah. And there's a reason. It is hard. So I don't think you want to make it even harder on yourself and have to play catch up. It's not critical to go 2-2, but it is critical to go 1-1. I think the most critical part of the schedule is right there. Those first 2 games we've already covered. What's the most critical part? Jeff, where's the most critical part of the schedule for you?
Later in the season, starting with Black Friday against Vegas. You get the Chargers the next week. You're at the Browns on December 15th. You got Houston on December 21st, and then you got Christmas Day game at Pittsburgh. Sam's, favorite game of the season. That's the last 3 of those, or 3 games in 10 days, and all 5 of those teams are going to be super physical. I think you're going to take a serious pounding. The Raiders obviously have committed themselves to playing tough defense, and Antonio Pierce has made it clear he wants to get after Mahomes. Jim Harbaugh is going to be playing physical football with the Chargers. They're going to be running the ball like crazy. And then the Browns, Myles Garrett, that defense, the run game, Houston, C.J. Stroud. He'll be throwing it, but still, Will Anderson, Danielle Hunter, and then Pittsburgh is going to be a physical team. And so you're talking about a lot of teams that can get after your quarterback. I mean, obviously, all 5 of those teams can get after your quarterback. You're talking about teams that are known for pounding, being physical. And I just think that's going to be a tough – if they're banged up going into that stretch, that could be a brutal, brutal 5-game stretch for them.
Okay. Sam, where's your critical point?
I think that's a great point, just about the physicality that they're going to face right before they go into the playoffs, because that Raiders game is kind of the last one of last year that they had to play a team that played like that. I mean, the Chargers laid over, and the last week of the season, the Chiefs got a bye out of it, even as a 3 seed. But the thing I picked before the show, because I do think Jeff makes a great point, is the opening month. I don't think it's just the first 2 games, because I think you could make if the Chiefs are 0-2 after 2 games, we're going to be treating week 3 like it's a humongous game. If the Chiefs are 2-0 after those first 2 games, we're going to be saying they can't have a letdown now. And that 3rd game is a primetime game on Sunday night. And this leads into, I think, our next talking point. They weren't great on primetime last year.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's talk about that. Primetime games all over the place, odd games. Every day of the week, it's been well documented, except Tuesday. Jason Anderson, who works with me, said, I'm really hoping we get a weather delay on one of those Monday nighters so the game can stretch into 12:01 a.m. Eastern time, so they can say they played on every day of the week. How about it? Is that help or hurt the Chiefs, Jeff, having all those odd times to play?
It hurts. I mean, that's a tough. I mean, it's
because I'm going to argue the other side. I actually think there's a benefit to it.
That gives them some chip on the shoulder type of thing. Is that what you're going to say?
Nope.
Okay. Well, I would say anytime you're playing that many games, odd times, it does affect. I mean, it's the key players for this team. I say all the time: Travis Kelce, Chris Jones, and Patrick Mahomes. And only one of those guys is under the age of 30. Like, you begin to feel this stuff. And you saw it, especially with Travis Kelce at the end of last year, where it was just like he was really struggling to rebound from games. When you start playing on short weeks, you start playing, Monday nights, Sunday nights, Saturdays, Fridays, whatever it is, Wednesdays, it's going to take a toll on you. So, yeah, I don't, are they good enough to overcome it? Sure. But do I think it's going to have an impact on them collectively? Yeah.
Okay. How about it? Odd times. Good, bad, different, Sam?
Yeah, so it was one thing I didn't think we talked enough about last year, which is their standalone game performances, which is what the odd time games are. They were 3-4 last year. And you go through these, even the 3 wins.
Can we say, and I don't remember all 7 of them.
Well, let's go through it. Let's go through the 7. Yeah, so the first one is the Lions, which, despite having the focus of a lifetime, they lose that game.
Yeah.
The second one is the Jets on Sunday night. They almost blow that game. That's one of their 3 wins.
Come on, then they almost beat the Lions. Don't either their wins or
they almost lost the game. Yeah,
they beat the Lions, but that's one of the wins. They beat the Jets. Then they beat the Broncos in a standalone game 19-8. at Arrowhead Stadium.
Dominant win, double digits.
They beat the Dolphins in Germany. The defense was fantastic. Offense gets shut out in the second half. They lose to the Eagles. They lose to the Packers. They lose to the Raiders. They're 3-4 last year on those standalone games where they're the only team playing at the time. And I mean, what they go 11-6 last year, so they're 8-2 in the other 10 games. I mean, I realize that usually the standalone games are against the more difficult teams, but two of those three teams I just listed are the Broncos and the Raiders. And the Eagles, by the time the Chiefs got them, were a different team than they were in the first month and a half of the season. So I'm just saying they were not good in this spot a year ago.
I'm not even sure what Matt's upset about.
Yeah.
What the hell are we doing here? Listen.
Talking about the schedule.
Listen, I agree. If you ask a coach, what do you want? I want to play at noon every Sunday. I want my routine. I want it to go. And everybody looks at it from the perspective of what does it mean for the one team, your team, and people get nervous about it, right? Like, well, my team, I know my coach would prefer to have it another way, but the other team has to play that too. They have to do those games as well. And I know, Sam, maybe it wasn't their stylistically best performances, but they did. They went 4-3 in those games.
3-4.
Almost beat the Lions, right? Like
that doesn't count.
Well, don't bring up the Jets being close, right? That's hypocritical, right? Like we're either counting them as just wins or talking about how they could have been. Okay. I don't care which. I don't care what the rules are, as long as we're all playing by it. My point is this, and I'm not saying it is going to be a positive because Sam makes a great point. The 3-4 record last year says a lot. I have no rebuttal for that, right? Because it's about wins and losses. But I will say the other team has to prepare on those odd times as well. And Andy Reid and the core of this team, and Jeff, you make a great point about the guys getting into their 30s. And Joe Tooney is coming off an injury too. And he's a big part of that offensive line. And they don't have Nick Allegretti to plug right in there. Guys getting older and getting hurt is an issue. But I do think that they have been around the block and played these games. And I think experience does matter. And I think Andy Reid is the best at getting ready on odd times. And I know it didn't go his way necessarily last year. They had a lot of things that were going against it. They just would not stop playing. Guys who couldn't catch. And we know that it all seemed to get fixed once that got solved, right?
So let's subtract the wins and losses out of it and just look at their offensive performances in those games last year. Their worst yards per play last season, any game, was the Raiders at home, standalone game. Second worst.
Who were the wideouts that were playing?
Second was Philly. They had everyone in that game. Third was
MVS dropped the game-winning touchdown.
That's part of the game. That's part of the team.
He was out there.
The team. He was on their team. But their third worst is the Chargers. The starters don't play. The fourth worst is Miami, standalone game. Fifth worst is Denver. That was a terrible game. Sixth worst is Detroit, standalone game. With the starters, 4 of their 5 worst performances last year were these standalone games. And by the way, none of their 5 best fall into this category. It's the Chargers, Bengals, Jacksonville, the Raiders game they won in Vegas, and Chicago. Those are their 5 best performances. None of them fall into this criteria. I'm not saying this is automatically going to carry over from year to year. I'm just saying there was a demonstrative difference in the way this team played in these standalone games compared to the way they played in the other games last year.
Was that the case in years past?
We'd have to go through the schedule one by one on 2022.
Well, let's just take 22 and let's see. I don't know if I'll remember. They don't have.
They lost 3 games in 2022, and 2 of them were the late window against the Bills and
at Indy, home to the Bills.
The Indy game was a noon game. Year before, they did lose some of those games. You know, they lost to the Ravens.
All 3 of their losses the year before were on Sunday, standard rest.
Yeah. So you're saying the year before matters, just not last year.
No. I'm saying it all matters. Don't you agree that, like with Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, we have a 6-year sample size that we don't need to cherry pick just last year?
I do. I just think last year's the most relevant.
Yeah,
and I think it's all relevant. There's just a heavier weight on last year.
And I think the point Sam's making is that every year is different. And so I don't think it's worth going back 3 years and saying, well, look what they did in 2021 to validate what's happening. I think it's a different set of circumstances this year. And so I think.
So if every year is different, why are we worrying about last year?
Because there's no guarantee the offense is going to be better. We can't sit here and definitively say we know they're going to walk out there and be a dominant offense again, or the defense will be as good. I mean, they won last year because the defense was really good. As much as we want to talk about Mahomes and Andy Reid, if that defense isn't playing at a high level, they don't even win one playoff game probably. And maybe they beat the beat up Miami Dolphins, but they're not beating the Bills in that game. They're not beating the Ravens in that game. They're not beating the Niners. And so I think that's a very real question to ask. Is the better question to ask isn't just who are they playing, but how will they be playing when they see those teams?
Yeah. By the way, right now, if Eric is watching us and firing away on a burner account in here, a tear is going down his cheek right now with pride as Sam McDowell fires offensive numbers at everybody because he loves the offense over there. We love Gann Asphalt and Concrete, nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Parking lot problems, they've been making them disappear in KC since 1994. Don't risk accidents and liability in your lot. Get your parking lot restriped today. A brightly striped lot will cut down on accidents and keep your parking lot as safe as possible. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. Should a team, Jeff, have to play on Christmas Day back-to-back years?
Well, if it's a team that's going for a three-peat and a team that has been the biggest draw in the league for the last 5 years, then you're probably going to have that happen to you. I mean, it's not the fairest thing in the world, but in this league, a lot of times fairness doesn't matter as much as sex appeal. And so, yeah, I think that how many teams could you put in that slot and get what they're probably going to get as far as a draw? I don't think there's many, and that includes probably the Cowboys and some of the sexier teams in the league. It's the winner's curse, and I don't feel bad for them because they've proven they can overcome these kind of things, and it'll be a big game. I'm not sitting here thinking Russell Wilson and Justin Fields are going to be this huge challenge, but it's part of the deal. It's the reason why it's hard to three-peat, because they're going to keep making it harder and harder and harder for you to get back to the top.
I think it's a major advantage to do it on the road as opposed to home. I mean, I cannot imagine a bigger distraction for a team than waking up at home with family, with friends around on Christmas Day, and then having to go play a football game.
We just saw it, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's coincidental that was their worst game of the year. And then all of a sudden – you get to do it on the road. And that's why some people in the organization were excited that the Chiefs were going to play on the road in the postseason. People on here have mentioned their home record, as you referenced, Soren, and even in our comments. And I think it's because there are so much fewer distractions on the road. And it's one of the reasons across the league in the NFL that you've seen a home field advantage become less and less of an actual advantage.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I do agree that the on the road allows them to get away from the distraction. What I think is more, and listen, the NBA has been doing it, and their biggest teams play all the time, and I don't like that either. I think it should have to rotate, but I don't think it's fair to the fans.
Yeah.
Right? Like, especially the home fans. And I'm going to tell you, I know people in the ticket world, they see that. Like, I'm going to tell you, I guarantee you the people in the ticket office for the Kansas City Chiefs, they saw, we're on Christmas again. Oh, good, it's on the road. Whew.
Yeah.
Because that is not an easy sell. There are some people that it's great. Hey, we're all pretty much adults. We don't have any little kids. We don't care that it's cold. We'll gear up. I hunt. I got all my, boots and coats, and let's go do it. But it has a chance to be an ass weather day, right, for one. And then you got holiday stuff, people traveling, people out of town, and you got to try to pack 70,000+. It's a tough sell for a team to do. It's harder than people realize. I don't think the Chiefs will ever tell you that up front, but you get some of the business people and they'll be like, not the best, right? Like
the ticket sales told us that last year. They don't need to tell us. The Chiefs individually price every game, and the Raiders game was far and away their cheapest game of the year last year.
Yeah. No, I think it's unfair. And then the 3 games in 10 days. Like, at what point, Jeff, does the Players Association make it like I am so what I'm really tired of, like the owners don't care about the players' health. Yeah, I know. I don't need a player to tell me that for the 30th consecutive year. We're all aware of it. What we need is players to stop bitching about that and standing up at the collective bargaining table and saying, we're not budging on this one. This isn't something we put into the negotiations to give up so we can go get more money over here. They have given up on every health thing along the way just to get a couple more bucks. I don't want to hear any more players pissing and moaning about this. Like, you're going to be playing, you're going to turn into playing 34 games with 7 Wednesdays like the way soccer does it. If at some point you don't stand up and say, no, like it's on them to say this is too much.
Yeah, it is. But as you said, it's probably not a winning cause for them, which is probably why they don't fight it as hard. I mean, I think they realize that at some point you're going to be talking about an 18-game schedule and maybe 2 preseason games. It's the reality of being in a sport when you don't have guaranteed money, where the injury rate is super high, where the career longevity is super short, and guys are going to be concerned about how much they can get while they're playing. That's always going to be the biggest factor. And, unfortunately, I agree with you. There's some hypocrisy in it, but they're going to take the money every time over anything else. The money and maybe like the pot, might that might get lessened a little bit, and the rest of the off season. And so, other than that, I mean, we can't compare this league's union to the NBA or baseball anymore, because it's just they're different circumstances, and it's just harder for them to beat the owners. That's a lot of this stuff.
I definitely think you can compare them. The sports are different. Sam, do you think at some point, you put it on the players, like make health a priority?
Yeah, I mean, the Wednesday game is the one instance where it's going to really seem haywire, because Tuesday is one day later than we already play on Thursdays. I was surprised the timing of the Wednesday game, the week in which it falls. I thought it should have been the last game of the week, because then you get the normal Thursday, Friday, Saturday off, which is the same as playing on a Thursday, for example. After playing on a Sunday, you get 3 days off: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And so I was surprised that it does not fall at the back end of the week rather than the start of the ensuing. That you could play on Monday the following week. I just thought it would have
we lost you, Sam.
I just thought it would have made more sense to play it that way.
Is it just me, Jeff? Can you hear Sam?
I can hear him just fine. Yeah. Yeah, I heard everything you just said. Yeah, but I think the point that he's making. Can you hear me? I guess
let's go through one, Jeff. I mean, while Soren gets this figured out, I think there's one advantage that the Chiefs have that really no one's really mentioning, because it's an advantage, and people like to talk about the disadvantages of and that's across the board for all 32 teams. The Chiefs play the 49ers off of a bye. And Andy Reid's bye, and I don't think their bye week falls at an advantageous time. The teams that get the teams always want the latest bye in the season. It's one of the first things players look for is when's our bye. They don't want bye in week 6, but they play the 49ers off of the bye. We know Andy Reid's record off of a bye, but when you look at it and just compare it to when the other team does not have a bye, he's 28-3.
Yeah,
and a lot of times his bye record gets mixed up whenever he's got a bye and another team does. And I referenced that because last year in the week 18 of the regular season, he effectively took a bye. Chris Jones played, the rest of the team took a bye, then they come out and win in the playoffs. But 28-3 when he's the only team that has a bye, and that's going to be the situation against the 49ers. And so I do think there's an advantage baked into that schedule.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and can you hear us now, Soren?
Yeah, I can. It's
okay.
Something like I got a little short and it switched me over to some other speakers. I apologize, guys.
That's all right. That's all right. No, he was making the point about Andy Reid with a bye when other teams don't have a bye, being a pretty dominant coach. The one thing I'll say about this schedule and the way it breaks down at the end there, the way it does, is because college football season is over. And that's when the NFL really wants to capitalize. And so they're going to try and take every last piece of TV real estate they can get. And they're going to take marquee teams and make the most of them. So that's the biggest reason why it's set up the way it's set up.
Yeah. Listen, and I'll say this. The thing that I think is so where this is egregious is playing on Thursday is one thing, but you have a normal week the week before you play on Thursday and then extra rest. By playing on a Wednesday, you're going short week, albeit just one day. And I know they do it in the playoffs. They play on a Saturday. They go Sunday to Saturday in the playoffs. But you're going short week, even shorter week. That's the thing to me that's ridiculous. I mean, I think at some point, and maybe this is the way that the owners strong arm, and maybe you guys said this while I was messing with my technical problem. Maybe this is their way of strong arming them into 18 games with 2 byes and that kind of thing, which I'd be all for. 20 weeks of more football, yes, sign me up. But like that's what I really don't like is 6 days followed by 4 days.
That's why if you put it at the back end of the week, that would not happen. You play on the previous Sunday, you get a long week actually before you play on Wednesday, and then you only have the one short week playing Wednesday to Sunday. And by the way, that Wednesday to Sunday is the same as what they make teams do now when they play Sunday to Thursday. It's the same gap in time. And so it just surprised me that they decided that's when the Wednesday game falls, is into the next week as opposed to the previous week. And I still don't know the explanation for why they determined that, because it made so much more sense to do. They'd play 3 games in 12 days rather than 3 games in 10 days if they did it that way.
Yeah, no doubt. 3 out of 4 on the road to close. Usually the Chiefs have been kind of kissed with a lot of home games at the end and cold weather. They're going to play 3 out of 4 on the road. Jeff, how big of a hurdle is this?
Probably pretty close second to what I said was their tough stretch. I mean, obviously part of that stretch is included in what we're talking about here, but at Cleveland, Houston, at Pittsburgh, at Denver, you have to assume Denver is not going to be a factor in that finale. So maybe they're in a place where they have the division wrapped up and they can take a little bye week out of it. But if they're not, if they're playing for something, that's, again, I don't know how much confidence I would have in them surviving that stretch without somebody significant getting banged up. I just feel like it's just Cleveland, Houston, Pittsburgh, all those teams presumably will be playing for something. Presumably will be, unless they're facing injuries at that point, would be tough to deal with. It's like I think Matt thinks they're going to go 15-2. This team hasn't won more than 12 games only one time in the last 4 years, right? We're talking about. It's just like it's okay to talk about teams that can beat them. Yeah. So I think it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard. I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier. Those first 2 games become even more critical based on what they're seeing at the end.
Sam, what do you think? 3 out of 4 to wrap up. Usually they're getting a lot of home games to finish things off.
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad thing to finish on the road purely because, I mean, over half the time in the Mahomes tenure, the last game hasn't mattered. And I'd rather have a road game that doesn't matter than a home game that doesn't matter. So it's really hard to predict for that reason. If the game doesn't matter like it has in the past for the Chiefs, I just think you'd rather finish on the road and say to hell with it. So I realize, but really to really put a bow on what I said earlier, it's 3 road games in cold weather cities for those of us that have to travel to the games. So it's a terrible finish to the season. Yes.
You don't want to be in Cleveland in December?
Finished in Vegas 2 years ago. Las Vegas 2 years ago. And now you're going to Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and Denver.
And Sam, by the way, Sam has 2 kids under 5. And Dad will be gone for Christmas. Yeah. Good times.
It's tough schedule, yes.
Some iron.
It won't be so hard.
What is it? Steel City or Iron City? The beer they have there. You belly up at a bar on Christmas. Oh, what could be better?
Rolling Rock.
Listen, because Tommy Boe has said it 5 million times. He's so tickled with the idea that if they would lock up the number 1 seed, they would basically be able to shut it down after winning on Christmas. They would not play again until the 18th or 19th of January. So they could go from playing the 25th of December to the 19th of January. I mean, if they would lock up the 1 seed. If they take care of business, huh?
Well, that's actually a great point. I mean, do you because you have that extra time in the previous game, do you feel like you've got to get some guys some run in the last game of the season if you wind up with thank you. I know there's no sarcasm in that comment whatsoever.
Somebody said, Temecula said, poor media.
It's who everyone thinks about during these games. Yeah. But I think that actually is a good point. I mean, do you really want guys to have a month off if you're the number 1 seed? We're a long way from that. But certainly possible the Chiefs are.
We're analyzing the schedule. That's what we're doing. So we're looking at all the possibilities, and that is one of them. If they kick ass and roll, then Andy Reid would have his first kind of dilemma, wouldn't he? Like, how do you treat that? I think you did everybody. That's what I think you do.
I do too. He's always done that. He's always set guys. Chris Jones was the exception, not the rule.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see if it goes there. All right. Let's wrap it up with this, boys. Prediction time. This is not going to be we got plenty of time. Injuries might happen in training camp. Lots of things can happen that would cause us to change, our opinion. What do you got right now? Jeff?
11-6. I got them losing to the Bengals, Chargers, at the 49ers, at the Bills. I was torn between Browns or Steelers. I will go with at Browns, and I'll go Houston.
Sam?
I got them at 12-5. I'm more to what Jeff referenced earlier as far as kind of grouping. I think they escaped the first 2 games going 1-1. I think they lose at San Fran. I think they beat the Bills this year. I don't think the Bills are going to be as strong. I think they lose at Cleveland. I think that's going to be a tough game. And they just always lose a game that surprises us. None of us would predicted them to lose to the Raiders at home last year. I think, somebody beats them at home that shouldn't beat them at home.
I'd put the over under. I think it's really at 11.5, right? That's what the real number is.
Yeah.
I think you bet the over or you don't play it.
But let's not forget, let's remind Sam that I got their record right last year when we did this.
Yes, he did. 100%. He got it right. You said 11-6, and it was 11-6. Tommy, a true Chiefs hater. Good Lord. I think the real number for a total, the math is about guys getting hurt, and that's what's going to hold this team back, or being unfocused. Like I said, there's a history. No one's ever won 3 in a row, so things can go wrong. Unforeseen things can go wrong. But I think the real number should be 12 or 12.5. Like 12.1. I think 12-5 is the likely one.
So wait a minute. So you think Rashee Rice being out won't be a factor then, what you're saying?
Well, I mean,
if he's gone for 8 games, you're saying they're going 12-5.
He wasn't around last year. He wasn't the player he would become for the first half of last year, although he did contribute, and they still won 11 games. And I think it's a big upgrade to Hollywood Brown. I actually think you're going to see the big difference between him and MVS, and we've talked about it before. He has not had Hall of Fame quarterbacks throwing him the ball. I think he is going to be better than a lot of people think. I think he'll be a one and done because he's going to parlay this into a bigger contract. I think he's going to play and play well. I think that's a big advantage for him. I'm with you. I think the defense is still salty. I think they're going to be pretty damn good. Injuries may catch up with them because they are getting a little bit older in spots. I'm going to take them 13-4. I think Patrick Mahomes is a guy who understands history. And I think he's going to put a foot in some asses. And I said last year a couple times, if they can somehow win it this year, it sets up for what is the ultimate motivation, a chance to do something no one's ever done.
Wow.
And it's so hard to get to this point. You can't squander it. And I think in a way, the shenanigans that have gone on in this offseason, the fact that they happen now, give them the opportunity at OTAs, mini camps, all that, when everybody's there to say, enough. History is in front of us. Let's go get it. They might fall flat on their face, but I'm going to bet on Patrick Mahomes. Why wouldn't you?
I think they're better when they feel doubted and disrespected than they are when they're chasing glory.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, Patrick Mahomes' record when he's an underdog is ridiculous. That's not coincidental. Last year during the playoffs, I had looked it up because so many people after that Bills game, maybe it was the Ravens game, had mentioned, I'd asked a bunch of people in the locker room, why are you so good in the underdog role? Because you guys aren't. and the underdog role. And when you really broke it down, that locker room is littered with like underdog stories, guys that are not. I mean, Patrick Mahomes was pissed off in Chicago because he was taken 10th. Travis Kelce's taken in the 3rd round, and he gets a lecture from Andy Reid before he's even drafted on the team. They only had one guy that was a top 10 pick on that entire team last year. And the Lions had like 6 or 7. The 49ers had 6 or 7. The Ravens had 6 or 7. They all had a lot more guys who were supposed to be where they got. And the Chiefs had a lot of guys who weren't supposed to be where they got. And so, yeah, I absolutely think that's a reason that they're better in the roles in which they are doubted.
I will address this, Joe. 11-6, 11 times
Picking against them. Picking against
them. That's right.
If we'd gone 8-9, that's right.
We're gonna walk into the locker room and they're gonna say Jeff Chadiha predicted us 11-6.
That's right.
But they will find a reason to make themselves the underdog.
Absolutely, every team does it.
Yes, they will do it. They will do it. And speaking of doing it, that'll do it for us. Remember, we're proudly brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. You can find them online at GannAsphalt.com. It is also Best of Me Wellness. We want to remind you, Podcast 25, when you check out at Best of Me Wellness, you can receive 25% off your entire order. That's good on both pickup or home delivery. BestofMeWellness.com. You can get more information there. For Jeff Chadiha from NFL.com and the NFL Network, Sam McDowell from the Kansas City Star, I'm Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining us here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.